My name is Daniel Whitmore, and for the longest time, I believed myself to be a man who could read people. I prided myself on looking past the smiles, the polite gestures, and the crafted words that so often disguise human intent. But if I'm being honest, there was one person I could never truly see through, my fiancée, Evelyn. I work really hard to make videos for you all, so please subscribe to my channel and like this video. Also, make sure to tell me your name and where you are watching this story from. Let's start the story. Evelyn was everything a man dreams of when he thinks of the one. She had this calm, unshakable grace about her, a way of standing in her room that made people lower their voices, lean closer, as though caught in her gravity. Her beauty was disarming, but it wasn't just that, it was the poise, the intelligence in her eyes, the way she could parse through a heated argument with only a razor-edged sentence. I fell for her hard, and she let me. Or maybe she wanted me to. We lived in Boston, me, a journalist still clawing my way past local columns and investigative scraps, and her, the daughter of an old-money Connecticut family. That imbalance didn't matter to me at the time. I didn't grow up around wealth, so I had no scale for what it could twist, or how deeply it could bury secrets. At first, Evelyn didn't invite me into her social world. She kept me apart from her friends, never openly, but with subtle excuses. It's just a small thing, nothing worth your time, or they can be dull, Daniel, you wouldn't enjoy it. She was always gentle when she pushed me away, but she pushed nevertheless. I thought it was embarrassment, plain and simple, that she was afraid her wealthy circle would look down on me, the nobody journalist. And that stung. Trust is delicate, and her distance felt like rejection. Only much later would I uncover the truth, she wasn't embarrassed of me. She was protecting me. Protecting me from what, I'll let you discover as I did. But I will tell you this, her world carved into me, leaving scars I will never fully understand. This story begins with Evelyn, but it doesn't belong only to her. It belongs to the shadows she tried to shield me from, the people who swam in them, and the choices we both made that would destroy the very foundation of what we had. It begins with a single night, and like all stories worth telling, it starts in ignorance. It was late autumn in Boston, the kind of evening when the air sharpened with the promise of winter, and the city lights bled gold across damp pavement. Evelyn had returned from a trip to New York where she'd visited some of her old friends. She came back quieter than usual that night, settling into our apartment without her usual teasing smile or graceful chatter. I chalked it up to exhaustion until she slipped saying something that made my journalist's instincts spark. They change. They look perfect, but under all the polish, she cut herself off, ran her hands through her chestnut hair, and smiled too quickly. Never mind. I'm rambling. I pushed, gently, but she shut me down with that look, the one that pretended to be playful dismissal, when in truth, it meant this is a door you cannot open. Still, the more Evelyn tried to distance me from that world, the more curious I became. I was a reporter. Curiosity was a condition of existence. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. One of her friends, I remembered the name, because Evelyn had mentioned him once with a faint sneer, was throwing a casual gathering in Manhattan. His name was Charles Whitford, heir to a banking dynasty old enough to be written into textbooks. Evelyn went reluctantly but couldn't avoid it, family obligations, she said with a bitterness that didn't suit her polished voice. For the first time, she let me come along. I remember stepping into Charles's penthouse, a glass palace perched over the city, every surface gleaming, every smile carefully lit. Men in tailored suits stood in clusters, sipping aged scotch. Women in black dresses and diamond chains glided across the floor with practiced laughter. It was wealth distilled into atmosphere, and all I could think about was how alien it felt. Evelyn's hand clung to my arm, tighter than usual. She was nervous, though she hid it well. Every time we passed one of her friends, she traded polite nods, empty hellos. But things I noticed, their eyes. All of them had that look I'd seen before in certain corners of Boston, sharp, assessing, like predators dressed as aristocrats. Then I heard something. Just whispers at first, but enough to prick me awake. Two men in the corner, leaning close over their glasses. I couldn't catch it all, but words drifted over the hum of the party, shipment, overseas accounts, it has to disappear before, then laughter, soft, calculated. Something darker breathed under those chandeliers, something entirely out of place at what should have been a dull social gathering. I turned to Evelyn, quietly asking who those men were. Her body went rigid. She smiled at me, the kind of smile meant for strangers, and whispered through her teeth. "Don't ask. Please, Daniel. For once, just don't." It was the first time Evelyn ever begged me, and I knew instantly she wasn't shielding herself. She was shielding me. Yet that only made me want to know more. That night, as we left the party, I caught her slipping into silence again. In the cab ride back to the hotel, I reached for her hand and asked, "What are you mixed up in, Evelyn?" Tears filled her eyes, though she blinked them back quickly. Then she said words that still haunt me to this day. "You think you want the truth, but the truth will ruin us both." I didn't answer. I couldn't. But in that moment, under the cold Manhattan glow, I realized that my fiancé was caught in something vast, something dangerous. And instead of sharing it, she was building walls between us, brick by brick, hoping to shield me before the cracks became fatal. I wish I had listened. I wish I had respected her silence. But a journalist's instincts, once stirred, are unstoppable. And uncovering the truth about Evelyn's friends would become my undoing. The morning after Charles Whitford's party, I woke to find Evelyn standing by the hotel window, wrapped in a thin robe, staring out at the towers of Manhattan. She hadn't slept much, that much was clear from the faint shadows under her eyes. When she noticed I was awake, she smiled as though nothing was wrong. But I had seen that look too many times before in other faces, the look of someone carrying secrets too heavy to put into words. I decided, against my better judgment, that if Evelyn wouldn't let me in, I would find my own way. While she attended a brunch with the so-called Whitford Circle, I slipped away with only my notebook and the restless curiosity that defined me. I began small, digging into public records about Charles Whitford, and then into the names I could recall from the penthouse. What I found wasn't damning on the surface: charities, investment firms, real estate holdings. All pristine, polished, entirely legal. Too perfect. But it was the patterns that troubled me. Every one of them held stakes in logistics firms, shipping companies, or obscure import-export operations. And all of them had subsidiaries tangled in jurisdictions across the Caribbean, Eastern Europe, or South America. The deeper I looked, the more it felt like a carefully choreographed web, money flowing in circles, businesses folding into shell corporations, assets shifting tax-free across borders. It looked, to put it bluntly, like laundering. That evening, Evelyn noticed something in my eyes. She knew me too well. "You've been doing it, haven't you?" she asked softly, as though already resigned to my betrayal. "I just want to understand," I admitted. "I need to know what they're hiding." Her eyes glistened, more with frustration than pain. "Daniel, listen to me, information is poison in this world. If you know too much, you don't walk away. You think they joke about disappearances? They don't." I could tell she wasn't exaggerating. But once the thread is pulled in my line of work, I can't stop until the whole thing unravels. The first real break came a week later, when I returned to Boston and begun calling an old police contact who owed me favors. After some pressing, and after I carefully avoided Evelyn's knowledge, he confided in me under strict terms. Whitford and his companions? They're ghosts, but their shadows show up every time drugs or arms are seized off the East Coast. You didn't hear that from me. And you didn't ask. Suddenly, those snippets of conversation from the penthouse, shipment and overseas accounts, cut sharper than ever. This wasn't just money games and tax evasion. Something much darker. The second break came by accident. I stumbled across old headlines about the suspicious death of a man named Adam Krasner, once a mid-level executive in one of those freight companies linked to Whitford's social circuit. Officially, it was ruled an accident at sea. But buried in a small column was a note that Krasner had been preparing to meet an investigative journalist days before his death. His name had been etched into silence, conveniently forgotten. The journalist had published nothing. When I read that, my stomach tightened in fear. Fear for myself. Fear for Evelyn. And yet when she asked me later that night if I still trusted her, I hesitated too long before lying with a simple, yes. The hesitation wasn't lost on her. For the next days, our home felt different, two people under the same roof but drifting, she with her unresolved secrets, me with my dangerous obsession. And although she never said it outright, I could feel what Evelyn was doing, building a shield of distance, praying that if she kept me at arm's length, these shadows would pass me by. But shadows don't vanish when ignored. They grow. They follow. One evening, after a day buried in records and notes, I came home to find an envelope slipped under the door. No return mark. No handwriting. Just my name typed neatly in black letters. Inside was a single photograph. It showed me and Evelyn leaving Charles Whitford's penthouse. Taken from across the street, grainy, but unmistakable. On the back, scrawled in ink, it read, "Stop digging or she pays." It was then I understood, I was not just stumbling into Evelyn's world by accident. I was being watched. I sat frozen with the photograph clenched in my hand, the scribbled words burning into my mind. For years, chasing stories had brought me to shady corners of Boston's politics, corrupt unions, backroom dealings, but never had the shadows turned toward me so directly. This wasn't just a warning. It was a promise. Evelyn found me like that 30 minutes later, sitting at the dining table with a glass of untouched whiskey. When I showed her the envelope, she didn't gasp or reach for me. No, she closed her eyes slowly, as if a truth she had been outrunning had finally caught up. "I told you, Daniel," she whispered, her voice breaking in a way I had never heard before. "This is the cost of wanting to know. Now they see you. All the more reason to come clean," I snapped. "If you know what they're tied up in, if you've been keeping me in the dark." Her eyes flashed at me, sharp, almost panicked. "You don't understand. The less you know, the safer you are. If you keep digging, if you keep pressing me, they won't stop until they..." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. That night, we didn't sleep. Evelyn paced the apartment like a trapped bird, running her hands through her hair, muttering half-thoughts about obligations and debts and family ties. Every time I asked for clarity, she slammed the door of silence shut again. But I saw it for what it was, fear. Not of me, not of losing me, but of those people who smiled behind champagne glasses while speaking in poison-laced whispers. It was the first time the woman I loved looked like a stranger, haunted, frightened, shackled to something I couldn't yet see. I made a choice that night. If Evelyn couldn't, or wouldn't, expose the truth, I would. The next day, I started following the threads again, but far more carefully. I used payphones instead of my cell, old press contacts, public archives. I asked questions around the docks in South Boston, where whispers always float when shipments arrive without inspections. It didn't take long before I found someone willing to talk, a dock worker, grizzled and drunk enough to risk a few loose words when I bought him beers at a shabby bar. "You didn't hear from me," he said, leaning closer, eyes darting. "But containers come in, no records, no customs. They say it's just antiques or metals, but I've seen crates carried off the books, black vans, no questions. Everyone's paid to look the other way. What's in the crates? I pressed. He lowered his voice to a trembling whisper. Guns. Sometimes, worse. When I pushed for more, he shoved back from the table and stormed out, muttering, "You don't want this heat on you, kid. Walk away." But I couldn't walk away. That night, Evelyn confronted me when she noticed the dirt on my shoes, the faint trace of whiskey on my breath. "Where were you?" "The docks," I admitted finally. "And I know what's moving through them. I know who's moving it." Her hand shot to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. "God, Daniel. You're signing your own death sentence. Then help me. Tell me what you know." She broke then. Tears streamed down her face, her composure shattering. She clutched my arm with trembling fingers and whispered, "If I tell you, if I drag you into this, you'll never get out alive. I've already lost sleep, family, trust. I won't lose you, too." Her words tore at me. Because in her desperation, I realized something. The reason Evelyn had kept me away from that world wasn't shame. It wasn't selfishness. It was love. But love built on secrecy crumbles faster than hate. That night, as she fell asleep in restless sobs beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I knew there was no turning back. The photograph proved it, whether I searched or not, they already had their eyes on me. And sooner or later, they would make their move. I should have known the confrontation wouldn't wait for me to be ready. It came on an ordinary Tuesday night. Evelyn and I were returning to our apartment when a black sedan pulled up across the street. Two men stepped out, impeccably dressed, but with eyes that carried no softness. Evelyn froze, her grip clamping by instinct on my arm. "Inside." "Now," she whispered sharply, but before we could turn, one of the men called out. "Mr. Whitmore." His tone was cool, rehearsed, like someone simply reciting a fact. A word. I felt Evelyn's nails dig into my wrist. Her fear was confirmation enough. These weren't strangers. They were her friends, the ones behind the smiles at painted parties, the ones she had begged me to stay away from. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't need to. One of them held out a folded piece of paper. My name was on it. Clean, typed letters. Just like the photograph envelope before. I hesitated. Evelyn took it instead, her movements trembling but practiced. She opened it, scanned it, then paled. "It's your silence they're buying," she whispered to me. This is your last chance." I snatched the paper. Inside was an ultimatum: leave the story, leave Evelyn, leave everything behind, or disappear like the ones who hadn't. The men didn't wait for my answer. They gave a polite nod, like businessmen concluding a negotiation, and slipped back into their car. The sedan rolled away, soundless against the wet street. Evelyn collapsed against me, sobbing. I had never seen her break like that. "You don't understand, Daniel. They will keep us alive as long as you back away. But if you fight them, if you try to expose them," her breath caught on a sob, "they will kill you. And they won't stop there." I held her, shaken to my core. For days I wrestled with the choice. My journalist's blood raged for the truth, for exposure, for justice. But what is justice worth if the cost is the woman you love? In the end, I made my decision. I burned my notes. Called in favors to close every lead I had pushed. To my editor, I muttered something about sources drying up. And to Evelyn, I promised I would never again ask about her friends, her circles, her secrets. It was the price of keeping her safe. But safety carried a different poison. Trust between us had rotted. She knew I had seen the darkness in her world, and I knew she would always belong partly to it. We were bound together by love, but separated by secrets too dangerous to be spoken aloud. Weeks later, I found myself alone in a hotel room in Chicago, on assignment for a harmless political profile. Evelyn and I had parted quietly, not angrily, not cruelly, simply, inevitably. The last thing she said to me still lives in my chest. You were the one thing I wanted to keep pure, Daniel. The one life I hoped to protect from them. I'm sorry I failed. I never heard from her again. Sometimes, late at night, I catch myself wondering if she's still alive, if she remained in their world, swallowed by diamonds and shadows, or if she found a way out I couldn't give her. Sometimes I even imagine a knock at my door, her face in the hall, free at last. But then I remember the photograph, the message, the sedan under the lamplight. And I know some ghosts refuse to let go. I chose survival. I chose silence. And I have lived with that choice every day since. This was Evelyn's story as much as mine, a love ruined not by betrayal, but by the shadows of power and the secrets that protect it. A story that ended not with death, but with distance. And sometimes, that is the crueler ending.